Welcome back to the final chapter of this story. Sarah Hayes started as a victim, became a weapon, and now faces an impossible choice: freedom without power or power without freedom. But in Chan-wook's world, nothing is ever that simple. And the biggest revelations, and the most dangerous consequences, are still to come. This is where everything changes. This is where Sarah discovers who she really is. Let's begin. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her room, the room she'd first entered as a prisoner and now occupied as, what? A guest? An accomplice? Something in between? Her passport sat on the nightstand, that small blue book representing escape and opportunity and everything she thought she wanted. But every time she reached for it, she hesitated. What would I even do? She thought. Go back to hotel work? Pretend none of this happened? The truth was that the girl who had worked at the Grand Meridian Hotel didn't exist anymore. That naive, struggling, invisible girl had died the night she walked into Suite 4201. What remained was someone more complicated. Someone who had learned to fight, to lie, to manipulate. Someone who had tasted power and found it addictive. Someone who had fallen in love with a monster. Because that was the real truth Sarah had been avoiding. Somewhere between the training sessions and the dangerous jobs and the late-night conversations, she'd fallen in love with Lee Chan-wook. Not despite what he was, but maybe because of it. He saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. He believed she was capable of extraordinary things and then proved it by making her capable. Was that love? Or just Stockholm Syndrome with better packaging? At dawn, Sarah made her decision. She got dressed, grabbed her passport and walked to Chan-wook's office. He was already awake, sitting at his desk with a coffee and a stack of documents. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm not leaving," Sarah said. Something flickered across his face, relief, triumph, something softer. But he just nodded. "Okay. But I'm not staying because I have to. I'm staying because I choose to. Which means things change between us." "What things?" "All things." Sarah walked closer, placing her passport on his desk. "If I'm here by choice, then I'm your partner. Not your employee, not your asset. You're equal. That means I get access to everything, all your files, all your operations, all your plans. No more secrets. No more manipulation." Chan-wook studied her for a long moment. "That's asking for a lot of trust. That's asking for the bare minimum. You want me to choose you freely? Then treat me like someone capable of making informed choices. Show me who you really are, all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. And if you don't like what you see, then I leave. For real this time. No guilt, no threats, no manipulation. Just a clean break." She met his eyes. "Can you live with that? Can you? Because Sarah, if I show you everything, if you really understand the full scope of what I do and who I am, you might not be able to live with yourself for staying." "That's my choice to make," Sarah said firmly. "Not yours." Chan-wook was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, walked around the desk and stood in front of her. Close enough to touch but not touching. "All right," he said. "Partnership. Full disclosure. Equal footing." He extended his hand. "But once you see everything, you don't get to unsee it. You're all in or you're all out. No middle ground." Sarah took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, real. "I understand. Then welcome to the empire, partner." He smiled, a genuine smile, not the calculated masks he usually wore. "Let's see if you can handle the truth." Over the next days, Chan-wook kept his word. He showed Sarah everything. The legitimate businesses were fronts for money laundering, restaurants that reported fictional customers, real estate deals that inflated prices to clean dirty money. The information business wasn't just corporate espionage, it was blackmail, coercion, selling secrets to the highest bidder regardless of the consequences. He showed her the files on politicians he controlled, businessmen he owned, criminals he partnered with. He showed her evidence of crimes, theft, assault, worse. He showed her the eliminated list and explained each name, each threat that had been neutralized permanently. "I don't kill indiscriminately," he explained. "Every name on that list was someone who threatened my operation or hurt innocent people. But yes, I made the decision. I gave the order. And I'd do it again." Sarah listened to all of it without flinching. She'd come too far to pretend shock or moral superiority. Instead, she asked questions, pushed for details, tried to understand the logic behind his empire. And slowly she realized something disturbing. She understood it. The violence, the manipulation, the moral compromises, she understood why he made them. Understood how easy it was to justify terrible things when you believed you were protecting something important. "Does it bother you?" Chan-wook asked one evening as they reviewed contracts for a new money laundering operation. Knowing all of this? Yes, Sarah said honestly. But not as much as it should. Which bothers me more. That's how it starts. First you understand. Then you accept. Then you participate. And one day you wake up and realize you're not the person you thought you were. You're someone else entirely. Is that what happened to you? Chan-wook was quiet for a moment. I grew up in a neighborhood where you were either predator or prey. I watched my father get beaten by loan sharks when he couldn't pay. Watched my mother sell everything we had just to keep food on the table. Watched the rich and powerful take whatever they wanted while people like us suffered. He set down his drink, his expression distant with memory. So I decided I'd rather be the one taking. I'd rather have power than beg for mercy. I built this empire from nothing. Every dollar, every connection, every piece of leverage. And yes, I've done terrible things to protect it. But I've also used it to help people who remind me of my parents. To punish people who prey on the weak. Like James Park. Like James Park. He wasn't just competition. He was everything I hate. Someone who uses power to exploit instead of to build. Taking him down wasn't just business. It was personal. Sarah absorbed this. So you see yourself as a hero? No. Heroes are for children's stories. I'm just someone who decided the rules don't apply to me. And if that makes me a monster, so be it. He looked at her. But I'd rather be an honest monster than a hypocritical victim. Is there a third option? Not in the world we live in. You're either strong or you're food. You taught me that, actually. Sarah frowned. I taught you. When you made the choice to stay instead of starve, to work for me instead of die, that was you choosing strength over victimhood. You could have refused, could have taken the moral high ground, could have died with your principles intact. But you chose survival. Chose power. Chose life. He smiled slightly. You're more like me than you want to admit. Sarah couldn't argue with that. Not anymore. Not after everything she'd done, everything she'd become. Sarah's seeing the full truth now. And instead of running, she's accepting it. Is she being corrupted, or was this darkness always inside her, just waiting for permission to emerge? Tell me in the comments, has Sarah lost herself, or has she finally found herself? And hit that subscribe button because we're entering the final act, and I promise you nothing will prepare you for what comes next. 3 weeks into their new partnership, Chan-wook brought Sarah to a meeting she'd never been allowed to attend before. A gathering of his top associates, the people who ran his empire's various branches. Money laundering, information brokerage, protection rackets, legitimate businesses. Sarah sat beside him at the head of the table, wearing a designer suit that cost more than a car, her hair styled professionally, her expression composed. She looked like she belonged there. And maybe she did. The meeting covered logistics, shipments, payments, problems that needed solving. Sarah contributed where appropriate, offered insights that came from her months of training and experience. The other associates treated her with respect, or at least deference to Chan-wook's obvious trust in her. It felt powerful. It felt right. It felt like everything she'd never known she wanted. But halfway through the meeting, something shifted. One of the associates, a man named Kim who handled the protection rackets, brought up a problem. We have a situation with the restaurant on Gangnam Avenue, Kim said. Owner is refusing to pay. Says business is down, he can't afford it. Chan-wook's expression didn't change. Then make him afford it. We've tried. He's stubborn. Claims he'll go to the police if we push harder. Then he's made his choice. Chan-wook's voice was cold. Burn it down. Make it look like an electrical fire. He'll get insurance money, we'll get our message sent to the other businesses. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Wait, you're going to burn down his restaurant? It's business, Chan-wook said simply. He knew the terms when he agreed to protection. If we let one person refuse payment, everyone will try. But his staff, his employees, they'll lose their jobs. They didn't agree to anything. They'll find other jobs. Seoul is full of restaurants. That's not... Sarah stopped herself, aware that everyone was watching. Can I speak with you privately? Chan-wook's expression hardened slightly, but he nodded. They stepped out of the conference room into an adjacent office. What are you doing? Sarah hissed the moment the door closed. You can't burn down a restaurant just because the owner can't pay. I absolutely can. And I will. There has to be another way. Give him more time, restructure the payments, something. Sarah. Chan-wook's voice was gentle but firm. This is what I do. What we do. You said you wanted to be a partner, to see everything. This is everything. Sometimes protecting an empire means making examples. Of innocent people? Of people who break agreements. The employees aren't my concern. They should be. Sarah's voice rose. You told me you weren't like James Park, that you use your power to help people. But this is the same thing, hurting innocent people for profit. It's not the same at all. Park exploited people because he enjoyed it. I'm making a strategic decision to protect an organization that feeds hundreds of families, that provides services people need, that terrorizes small business owners, Sarah interrupted. God, listen to yourself. You've spent weeks showing me all your operations, explaining your logic, and I've gone along with it because I wanted to understand. But this, she gestured toward the conference room. This is just thuggery dressed up in fancy language. Chan-wook's expression turned cold. You think you understand my world after 3 months? You think you're qualified to question my decisions? I'm qualified to know right from wrong. Right and wrong are luxuries for people with options. We don't have that luxury. Yes, we do. You have millions of dollars. You have legitimate businesses. You don't need to burn down some struggling restaurant owner's livelihood just to make a point. They stared at each other, the space between them suddenly feeling vast despite their physical proximity. What do you want me to do, Sarah? Chan-wook asked quietly. Let him refuse payment? Let everyone see that they can defy me without consequences? That would be the beginning of the end for everything I've built. Then maybe what you've built deserves to end. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Chan-wook's face went completely blank. For a moment, just a moment, Sarah saw something in his eyes that might have been hurt. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of cold calculation. I see, he said softly. So you've made your choice after all. You can handle the blackmail and the money laundering and the violence when it's aimed at people you think deserve it. But when it affects someone you see as innocent, suddenly you remember your morals. That's not fair. Fair? He laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I gave you everything. Power, money, purpose. I turned you from nobody into someone extraordinary. And the moment I ask you to accept who I really am, not the edited version you've created in your head but the actual person, you can't handle it. I can handle you being a criminal, Sarah shot back. What I can't handle is you being cruel for no reason. There's always a reason. You just don't like it. He walked to the door, his hand on the handle. I have a decision to make. About the restaurant and about you. I suggest you think very carefully about whether you're ready for the consequences of questioning me. He walked out, leaving Sarah alone in the office. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. Everything she'd accepted, everything she'd justified, everything she'd become, it all came crashing down in that moment. Because Chan-wook was right about one thing. She had been creating an edited version of him in her head. A version where his crimes were somehow noble, his violence somehow justified. But the truth was uglier. He was a criminal who hurt people to maintain power. Full stop. And she'd fallen in love with him anyway. That was the part that scared her most. Not that he was willing to burn down a restaurant. But that part of her, the part that had become addicted to power, to being important, to mattering, understood why he was willing to do it. Sarah walked to the window and stared out at Seoul. All those lights. All those people. Living their normal lives, unaware of the shadow economies and power struggles happening in penthouse offices and underground meetings. She could still leave. Could take her money and disappear, start over somewhere new. Chan-wook might be hurt, might be angry, but he'd let her go. She believed that now. The question was, did she want to leave? Or had she already crossed too many lines to ever go back? The answer came faster than she expected. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's confrontation. Around 2 a.m., she heard voices from Chan-wook's office. She shouldn't eavesdrop. Shouldn't invade his privacy after everything that had happened. But she did it anyway. Moving silently, she crept down the hallway and pressed her ear to the office door. Can't afford to look weak, Chan-wook was saying. If we let this slide, every business on our protection list will think they can negotiate. I understand. That was Kim's voice. Should we move forward with the fire? Pause. Sarah held her breath. No, Chan-wook said finally. Find another solution. Restructure the payments. Give him 3 months to catch up, but make it clear this is the only chance he gets. And make sure the other business owners know about our generosity. Sometimes mercy sends a stronger message than violence. Sarah's breath caught. Sir? Kim sounded confused. Are you sure? After the meeting today I thought. I'm sure. Just handle it quietly. And Kim? This doesn't leave this room. Of course, sir. Sarah heard footsteps approaching the door and barely made it back to her room before Kim emerged. She closed her door silently and leaned against it, heart pounding. He'd changed his mind. After everything she'd said, after their argument, he'd chosen mercy over intimidation. Because of her. Sarah didn't know what to do with that information. Didn't know if it made things better or worse. On one hand, he'd listened to her, valued her opinion enough to alter his decision. On the other hand, he'd clearly struggled with it. And how many times would he choose mercy before his instincts? His training, his survival mechanisms, overrode her influence. The next morning, Chan-wook didn't mention the restaurant. They had breakfast together as usual, discussed business as usual, existed in their usual careful dance around deeper feelings. But something had shifted. Sarah could feel it in the way he looked at her, less guarded, more vulnerable. Like he was letting her see something he usually kept hidden. "I need to tell you something," he said over coffee. "About why I really am the way I am." Sarah set down her cup, giving him her full attention. "I told you about my parents," Chan-wook continued. "About growing up poor, about deciding to take power instead of begging for mercy. But I didn't tell you what finally pushed me over the edge." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "I was 17. My father had finally paid off the loan sharks who'd been bleeding him dry for years. We were going to be okay, not rich but stable. My mother was so happy. She kept talking about all the things we'd be able to afford now. Small things, new shoes for me, medicine for her arthritis, maybe even a real vacation." Sarah could hear the pain in his voice, buried under layers of control. 3 days later, a new gang moved into our neighborhood. They wanted protection money from all the businesses, including my father's shop. He refused. Said he'd already paid his debts, that he was done being extorted. Chan-wook's jaw tightened. They killed him. Beat him to death in the street while neighbors watched. No one called the police. No one helped. Everyone just looked away. Chan-wook, Sarah reached for his hand but he pulled away. My mother couldn't afford the shop without him. She sold it for nothing, took whatever jobs she could find. But she was never the same. She died 2 years later. Officially it was a heart attack. But really it was grief. It was poverty. It was a system that ground her down until she had nothing left. He finally looked at Sarah, and his eyes were full of something raw and terrible. "So yes, I'm a criminal. Yes, I hurt people. But I also make sure that people like my parents, people who are just trying to survive, have someone powerful enough to protect them. The restaurant owner who can't pay? His employees won't lose their jobs because of me. But they also won't get robbed on their way home because my people control that neighborhood. It's complicated, Sarah. It's not good versus evil. It's just survival on a larger scale." Sarah's throat was tight. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because it sounds like justification. Like I'm asking you to excuse everything I've done because I have a tragic backstory. But that's not what I want. I don't want your pity or your forgiveness. I just want you to understand that the choices I make, they're not about cruelty. They're about control. And control is the only thing that keeps chaos at bay." Sarah stood and walked around the table. Chan-wook looked up at her, his expression guarded, like he was expecting rejection. Instead, she pulled him to his feet and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his shoulder. "For what happened to your parents. For every time the world failed you. For not understanding sooner." Chan-wook was rigid for a moment, like he'd forgotten how to accept comfort. Then his arms came around her, holding her tight enough that she could barely breathe. "You make me want to be better," he said quietly. "And I hate it. Because being better makes you vulnerable. But I can't seem to help it where you're concerned." Sarah pulled back enough to look at his face. "Then let's be vulnerable together. Let's figure out how to use your power, our power, to actually help people instead of just maintaining control. There has to be a middle ground between being cruel and being weak. You're very idealistic for a criminal. And you're very emotional for a monster." She smiled. "Maybe we balance each other out." Chan-wook studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then he kissed her, soft and desperate and full of things neither of them knew how to say. "I love you," he said when they broke apart. The words sounded rusty, like he hadn't said them in years. Maybe ever. "I don't know if I'm capable of loving you the way you deserve. But I do. Completely." Sarah's eyes burned with tears. "I love you too. Even though you're infuriating and controlling and sometimes genuinely terrifying. I love you." "We're so fucked up," Chan-wook said, but he was smiling. "Completely." Sarah laughed through her tears. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe fucked up is better than fake." They stood there in the morning light, holding each other, two damaged people who had found something real in the middle of everything wrong. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even particularly healthy. But it was theirs. Over the next month, Sarah and Chan-wook worked to reshape his empire into something, if not good, then at least less actively harmful. They increased protection for the businesses they protected. They started a fund for employees displaced by criminal activity. They used their information network to expose actual corruption instead of just profiting from it. It was slow work. And not everyone in Chan-wook's organization was happy about it. "You're making us weak," Kim said during one particularly contentious meeting. "The other organizations see us going soft, they'll move against us." "Then let them try," Chan-wook replied. "We're not going soft. We're getting strategic. There's more money in helping people than hurting them, you just have to think long-term." But Kim wasn't the only one with concerns. Other associates started questioning decisions. Rivals started testing boundaries. And Sarah started to wonder if maybe mercy really was weakness in this world. The answer came violently. Sarah was leaving a charity event, one of Chan-wook's legitimate businesses hosting a fundraiser for underprivileged youth, when three men grabbed her in the parking garage. Professional. Fast. She didn't even have time to scream before a cloth covered her mouth and everything went dark. She woke in a warehouse tied to a chair, her head pounding. A man sat across from her, 50s, expensive suit, cold eyes. "Sarah Hayes," he said. "Or should I call you Sarah Chin? Or maybe just Sarah Lee, since that's what you'll be soon if Chan-wook is stupid enough to marry you." "Who are you?" Sarah's voice was hoarse. "Someone who's very interested in Chan-wook's recent softness. He used to be the most feared operator in Seoul. Now he's restructuring payment plans and starting charity funds. All because of you." Sarah's mind raced. This was someone from a rival organization. Someone who saw Chan-wook's changes as weakness and wanted to exploit it. "You're going to call him," the man continued. "Tell him that if he wants you back alive he needs to step down. Transfer his operations to me. Retire quietly. He'll never agree to that. Then you'll die. And he'll spend the rest of his life knowing that his little experiment in playing hero cost him the woman he loves." The man smiled. "Either way I win. Either I get his empire or I get to break him. Both options have their appeal." Sarah's training kicked in. She assessed the room, 3 guards, 1 exit, weapons visible on 2 of them. The ropes around her wrists were tight but not impossible. Min had taught her how to dislocate her thumb to slip restraints if necessary. But more importantly, Chan-wook had given her something none of these men knew about. A subdermal tracker, implanted months ago, that would lead his people directly to her location. "Okay," Sarah said, playing weak and terrified. "I'll call him. Just don't hurt me." The man's smile widened. "Smart girl." He handed her a phone. Sarah dialed Chan-wook's number with shaking fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Sarah?" "I've been taken," she said, letting her voice crack. "They want you to." The man grabbed the phone. "Lee Chan-wook. You have 2 hours to announce your retirement and transfer your operations to me. If you refuse, if you try to find us, if you do anything except exactly what I say, I'll send you back pieces of your girlfriend." Starting with her fingers. Sarah heard Chan-wook's voice, cold and deadly. "If you hurt her, there's nowhere you can hide. I will find you and I will make you beg for death." 2 hours, the man said and hung up. He turned to Sarah. "Now we wait. And hope your boyfriend loves you more than he loves power." Sarah said nothing. Just sat quietly, breathing steadily while her fingers worked at the ropes. She'd dislocate her thumb in about 90 minutes, giving Chan-wook's team enough time to track her but not so much time that these men got suspicious. But as the minutes ticked by, doubt crept in. What if Chan-wook couldn't find her in time? What if he decided his empire was worth more than her life? What if she'd been wrong about everything and he really was just using her? "No," she told herself firmly. "Whatever else is true, he loves me. I know he does." She had to believe that. Because if she didn't, if she let fear override trust, then everything they'd built together was meaningless. 73 minutes in, Sarah heard it, the distant sound of gunfire. The guards jumped to attention. The man who'd taken her phone pulled out his weapon and moved toward the door. More gunfire. Closer now. Shouting. Then silence. The warehouse door exploded inward. Chan-wook strode through, gun in hand, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, Min and a team of his people moved with military precision. "Nobody moves," Chan-wook said quietly. Every guard froze. They could see in his eyes that he meant it. Any movement would result in immediate death. Chan-wook's eyes found Sarah. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, rage, fear all mixed together. Are you hurt? I'm fine, Sarah said. Her thumb was still in its socket. She hadn't needed to dislocate it after all. But you should probably hurry with the dramatic rescue before these guys remember they have guns. Chan-wook's lips twitched into an almost smile. Then his expression went cold again as he turned to the man who had orchestrated Sarah's kidnapping. Park Sung-ho, Chan-wook said. I should have eliminated you years ago. Consider that mistake corrected. Wait, Park held up his hands. This was just business. Nothing personal. We can negotiate. You touched her. Chan-wook's voice was soft, which made it more terrifying. You threatened her. You made the worst mistake of your life. He pulled the trigger. Sarah flinched as Park collapsed, a neat hole in his forehead. The guards started to move, but Min and her team were faster. 3 more shots, 3 more bodies. Then it was over. Chan-wook lowered his gun and moved to Sarah, cutting her restraints with a knife he pulled from his boot. The moment she was free, he pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'm so fucking sorry. This is my fault. I got soft, I made you a target, Stop, Sarah interrupted. She pulled back to look at his face. This wasn't your fault. This was the world we live in. And yeah, it's terrifying and violent and fucked up. But we survived it. Together. Chan-wook cupped her face in his hands. When I got that call, when I thought I might lose you. His voice broke slightly. I realized I would burn down this entire city to get you back. My empire, my principles, everything, none of it matters compared to you. That's very romantic, Sarah said. But also kind of scary. I contain multitudes. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Let's go home. They walked out of the warehouse, leaving the bodies behind. Min and her team would handle cleanup. It's what they did. In the car, Sarah leaned against Chan-wook, exhausted and shaking with delayed adrenaline. You killed them. Yes. Without hesitation. Yes. He looked at her. Does that bother you? Sarah thought about it honestly. It should. But they were going to kill me. And probably you. So, no. It doesn't bother me. What does that say about me? That you're pragmatic. That you understand how the world works. That you've accepted who you are. A criminal. A survivor, Chan-wook corrected. There's a difference. Sarah wasn't sure there was. But she was too tired to argue. Sarah was kidnapped, threatened, and watched Chan-wook kill to protect her. And instead of being horrified, she's okay with it. Has she completely lost herself, or has she finally found where she belongs? Comment below with your thoughts, and if you're feeling as emotionally destroyed as I am, hit that subscribe button. Because we're in the final stretch and everything is about to come full circle. The kidnapping changed things. Sarah had always known intellectually that Chan-wook was dangerous. But seeing him kill without hesitation, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes as he eliminated threats, made it viscerally real. And the disturbing part was that it made her love him more, not less. I think I'm broken, she told him one night as they lay in bed, unable to sleep. Normal people would be traumatized by what happened. I'm just relieved, grateful, maybe even impressed. You're not broken. You're adapted. Chan-wook's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. Humans are incredibly flexible. We can adjust to almost anything if survival depends on it. You've adjusted to my world because staying soft would have gotten you killed. But I don't want to be hard. I don't want to be someone who watches people die and feels nothing. You don't feel nothing. You feel appropriate things. Fear, relief, gratitude. You just don't feel guilt for surviving, which is healthy. He tilted her face toward his. Sarah, listen to me. You are not a monster. You're someone who's learned to navigate a monstrous world. There's a difference. Sometimes I'm not sure there is. They were quiet for a while, lost in their own thoughts. What if we left? Sarah said suddenly. What if we took the money and just disappeared? Started over somewhere new, somewhere we could be normal? Chan-wook was silent for so long that Sarah thought he might be angry. But when he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Where would we go? I don't know. Somewhere warm. Somewhere without organized crime and power struggles and constant danger. Somewhere we could just be. You think places like that exist? Maybe. We could try to find out. Chan-wook sat up, turning on the lamp so he could see her face properly. You're serious? I think so. I love you. I love the power and the purpose and the feeling of matching. But I don't love the violence. The constant looking over our shoulders. The knowledge that any day could be the day someone finally takes you down. So you want to run. I want to survive. Long term. Together. Sarah sat up too, meeting his eyes. Can you honestly tell me you want to do this forever? Build empires and fight wars and kill people who threaten you? Is there any part of you that wants something quieter? Chan-wook looked away, his jaw tight. Sarah waited, giving him time to think. I don't know how to be quiet, he said finally. I've been fighting my whole life. I don't know who I am without the empire, without the power. It's all I have. It's not all you have. You have me. Is that enough? He looked at her, and his eyes were full of doubt she'd never seen before. Would I be enough for you without all this? Without the money and the protection and the ability to solve problems with a phone call? Just me with nothing? Sarah realized this was his deepest fear. Not that she'd leave him because of his crimes, but that she'd only stayed because of what he could provide. That she loved the power more than the man. She took his face in her hands. Chan-wook, I fell in love with you in a warehouse where you just killed 4 people to save me. Not because you're powerful. Not because you're rich. But because you looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. That's who you are without the empire. Someone capable of caring so deeply it terrifies you. That's who I want. That's who I choose. His eyes glistened. I've never run from anything in my life. Then don't think of it as running. Think of it as choosing life over legacy. Choosing us over everything else. She smiled. Besides, we wouldn't be completely normal. We'd still be criminals on the run. Still dangerous. Just less violently. Chan-wook laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. You've thought about this. For weeks. Ever since the kidnapping. Life's too short to spend it waiting for the next attack. She pressed her forehead against his. Let's disappear. Together. While we still can. What about your family? We make sure they're taken care of first. Set up trusts, protection, everything. Then we vanish. Become ghosts. Chan-wook was quiet again, but Sarah could see him considering it. Actually considering it. It would take planning, he said finally. Months, maybe a year. I'd need to transfer operations, tie up loose ends, make sure no one could track us. So we have time to be sure. Time to plan properly. Sarah kissed him softly. Time to imagine what our life could look like if we chose differently. You're going to be the death of me, Chan-wook murmured against her lips. You know that? You're making me soft. Good. You were too hard anyway. They made love then, slow and deliberate, like they were sealing a promise. And maybe they were. A promise to choose each other. To build something new. To find out who they could be without all the violence and crime and darkness. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But for the first time since Sarah had walked into that hotel suite 8 months ago, the future looked like something other than inevitable tragedy. It looked like choice. 1 year later. The cafe overlooked a beach in a country Sarah wouldn't have been able to point to on a map a year ago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, and tourists wandered past speaking languages she was still learning. Sarah Chin-lee, that was her name now, legally purchased with the kind of money that made authorities not ask too many questions, wiped down the counter and flipped the sign to closed. It was a small cafe. Nothing fancy. They served coffee and pastries to tourists and locals, made enough money to live comfortably but not extravagantly. It was exactly the kind of quiet, normal life that Chan-wook had claimed to not understand. But he'd figured it out. The man himself emerged from the kitchen, flour on his hands from the bread he'd been baking. He'd learned to cook of all things. Said it was meditative. Sarah suspected it was his way of having control over something without anyone getting hurt. Good day? He asked, pulling her into his arms despite the flour. Very good. The German couple left a huge tip. Sarah smiled. I think they're celebrating an anniversary. How long have we been married now? 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. And you're not bored yet? Desperately bored, Sarah teased. I miss the kidnappings and assassinations. The coffee shop life is so dull. Chan-wook laughed and kissed her. He laughed a lot now. It had taken months, but gradually the hard edges had softened. He still had nightmares sometimes. Still instinctively scanned every room for exits and threats. Still kept a gun hidden in their apartment, just in case. But he also baked bread. Learned to surf. Made friends with their elderly neighbor who taught him to garden. He was learning to be human instead of a weapon. And Sarah was learning that she preferred him this way, not less dangerous exactly, but dangerous in the service of protecting something beautiful instead of building an empire on fear. Your mom called, Chan-wook said as they locked up the cafe. Your brother got accepted to university. Full scholarship. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. He did. He did. She wanted me to tell you how grateful she is. For everything. Everything being the trust fund Chan-wook had set up before they disappeared. Sarah's mother would never have to work again. Her brother would get his education. They were protected, provided for, and had no idea where Sarah actually was. It was safer that way. Do you miss it? Sarah asked as they walked home along the beach. The power? The empire? Chan-wook considered the question seriously. Sometimes. Mostly I miss the certainty. Knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Here, I'm figuring it out as I go. And it's terrifying. And wonderful. And sometimes I want to burn it all down and go back to what I know. He squeezed her hand. But then I look at you and I remember why we left. Because this, he gestured at the beach, the sunset, their simple life. This is worth more than any empire. Sarah stopped walking and pulled him into a kiss. He tasted like flour and coffee and home. I love you, she said. Every version of you. The monster, the criminal, the baker, the husband. All of it. I love you too. My impossible, infuriating, beautiful wife who convinced me that soft could be strong. He rested his forehead against hers. Thank you for saving me. You saved me first. Then we're even. They walked home as the sun set, two people who had been criminals and victims and survivors, now just trying to be human. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, still moments when the past haunted them, still the constant low-level anxiety that someone might find them. But they'd made their choice. And they'd make it again every single day. Together. And there you have it. Sarah Hayes started as a powerless hotel maid and became a criminal, a weapon, a lover, and finally, maybe most importantly, someone who chose her own path. She found love in the darkest place imaginable, and somehow, impossibly, they both found redemption. Was it a happy ending? Maybe not in the traditional sense. But it was their ending, earned through blood and choice and the courage to imagine something different. Thank you for joining us on Mafia Love Story, where love is dangerous, desire is deadly, and sometimes the only way to save yourself is to embrace the darkness and find the light within it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories where passion meets danger and hearts beat with secrets. Until next time, stay dangerous, stay hopeful, and never forget that even in the darkest romance, choice is the most powerful weapon of all.